killed this woman in order to perform sexual acts on her deceased body. So it's a necrophilia case. These are very rare in the country. There's only a handful of these cases, true necrophilia cases. There are people out there that have a affinity towards deceased bodies, a fetish, if you might say, for that.
In this video, we'll discuss the story that occurred in Pennsylvania, U.S. in 2014, when 33-year-old Jessica Paget left work and never returned. CCTV footage helped to solve this case. What happened to the woman was so shocking that the jury refused to watch the video evidence presented by the prosecutor at the trial. Jessica Paget was born on December 15, 1980. The woman had spent her entire life in Pennsylvania. She was a very energetic and cheerful child. Her parents, Thomas and Danelle, divorced when she was still a child. Soon, her mother married another man, and Jessica considered him her second father. After graduating from high school in 1998, she went to college to study preschool education. While studying in college, Jessica met a guy named Michael Paget. They started dating and then living together. During the 8 years of their relationship, the couple had 2 children. However, they decided to marry each other in August 2014. Some sources also claimed they had another child, Michael's son from a previous relationship. Michael was a caring father and husband, but like in any other family, there were ups and downs in the couple's relationship. Still, Jessica was happy with Michael, and then just 4 months after the wedding, she disappeared. For 2 years, she worked at a kindergarten in Northampton. She liked this job because she loved children and knew how to find a common language with them. Quickly, this connection was mutual. The children liked Jessica and enjoyed spending time with her. On November 21, 2014, she took her older children to school and then went to work with her younger son, the boy going to the same kindergarten where Jessica worked. It was an ordinary day. Nothing foreshadowed trouble. At lunchtime, Jessica approached the administrator and asked to leave work for a while, as she needed to send a fax from the house of her mother and stepfather, who lived in a rural area near Northampton. The administrator allowed her to leave. Jessica went by car, leaving her son in kindergarten. She was supposed to be back within half an hour. However, an hour passed, and Jessica did not return. Worried, her colleagues started calling her, but she did not answer. An hour later, the kindergarten administrator contacted Michael and asked if he knew where Jessica might be, saying that she left work for a while but never returned. Michael said he was at work and did not know where his wife was. He also said he would try to contact her himself. Michael immediately started calling Jessica, but all his calls went to voicemail. It wasn't like Jessica because she never missed calls from her family. Michael decided to call his wife's mother, Danelle, who was in Florida, to ask if Jessica had contacted her, but Danelle had no contact with her daughter that day. Therefore, she immediately began to worry. She also knew that not answering the phone wasn't like Jessica. Danelle told Michael to call her husband and Jessica's stepfather, Greg, and talk to him, but as it turned out, Greg did not see or talk to Jessica that day. With each new minute, the relatives were getting more and more worried. After hundreds of unsuccessful attempts to contact her daughter, Danelle went to the airport and bought a ticket for the next flight to Pennsylvania. 4 hours after Jessica left work, Michael contacted the police and reported his wife missing. He said that Jessica would not have left the children under any circumstances of her own free will, and therefore he was afraid that something terrible could have happened to her. The police immediately launched an investigation, sending Jessica's description to all stations in the nearest cities. Jessica was about 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighed 130 pounds. She had a footprint tattoo on her shoulder, brown hair, and hazel eyes. The last time someone saw her, she was wearing gray sweatpants and a black hoodie with the words "Duck Duck Goose" on the front and "Staff" on the back. They checked all local hospitals and morgues, but found no one matching the description. Detectives were trying to find out where the mother of 3 children could have gone. They interviewed her colleagues, but everyone said that Jessica had no enemies. Both children and their parents loved her. They also mentioned that Jessica seemed okay when she left work at lunch. They didn't notice anything unusual in her behavior. 2 hours after Michael reported his wife missing, the police were able to track the signal from Jessica's phone. According to the data received, her phone was about 1 mile from the kindergarten where she worked. This data wasn't 100% accurate, since there is always some error when determining a phone's location. Nevertheless, the police now knew the area where the signal was coming from. By the time they started searching, it was already dark outside. In one of the parking lots, officers found a white Subaru Outback. It was Jessica's car. The car was empty and unlocked. Inside was her purse with documents and bank cards. The keys were in the ignition, and Jessica's phone was on the passenger seat close to her purse. There were no signs of a crime in the car at first glance. The police had to answer several questions. Where is Jessica? What forced her to abandon her car and valuables so close to the kindergarten where she worked? The police needed CCTV footage to answer these questions. The back wall of the store across the street had a CCTV camera. It captured the place where they found Jessica's car. The police went to the store and asked the manager to show them the recordings. While examining the footage, they saw Jessica driving into the parking lot shortly after 1 p.m., getting out of the car and standing at the driver's door for a while. While leaving her car, Jessica walked between these two buildings towards another parking lot. After that, she disappeared because there were no cameras there. The investigators were at a loss as to why Jessica left her documents, phone, and keys and disappeared. Could she have gone into hiding of her own free will? There was a small and old monitor in the store where the investigators watched the recording. Hence, they made a copy of the video to watch at the station on a modern and big screen. The Northampton Police Department was small, so they had to ask the Pennsylvania State Police to help organize the search. They distributed flyers with Jessica's image throughout Northampton and nearby cities through the media and social networks. Detectives began to restore the chronology of events preceding the disappearance of Jessica. The first thing they did was talk with the kindergarten staff one more time. After learning that Jessica left work to send a fax from her mother's house, the detectives went there, hoping to find answers to their questions. This house was about 4 miles from the kindergarten, meaning it was a 10-minute journey. Upon arrival, the detectives talked to Donnell and her husband Greg, from whom they learned that Jessica had keys to the house and she could come at any time. On the day of her disappearance, Donnell was in Florida and Greg wasn't home either. Every fax appeared in the device's usage history, but as it turned out, Greg's fax machine was faulty, so it was unclear whether Jessica was at her mother's house that day. Perhaps she decided to use another fax machine. However, it doesn't explain why she left her belongings in the car. Next, the detectives decided to talk to Jessica's husband, Michael. He said that on the day of his wife's disappearance, he was the first to leave the house. A friend picked him up, and they went to work together. They checked Michael's statement because it often happens that it is the husband who is involved in the disappearance or death of his wife. Meanwhile, they organized a search party. The media reported Jessica's disappearance and asked everyone who had any information to contact the police. 2 days had passed since the woman's disappearance, and the police hadn't had any new leads. To find out if Jessica had reached her mother's house, detectives started looking for surveillance cameras on her way. There was only one road leading to her mother's house. Next to this road, there was an Exxon gas station. It, of course, had surveillance cameras. If Jessica was going where she said she was going, she should have appeared on the recording from this camera. Watching the video, police saw Jessica's car. She drove there around 12:56 p.m. It was only a few minutes from the gas station to her mother's house, and since the fax machine was not working, she had to drive back soon. Looking through the recording to see if her car drove in the opposite direction, the officer saw something strange. Just 14 minutes later, the car reappeared in the footage. Her white car going through the gas station at high speed, going in the direction where the police later found her car. The way Jessica drove was peculiar. She could have driven straight, but instead, she turned towards the gas station and without stopping, drove onto the road on the other side. Next, she went to the city center, where she later left the car in the parking lot. The only logical explanation was that Jessica was in a hurry and there was a red traffic light at the intersection, so she drove through the gas station, thereby ending up on another road where the light was green. After that, she left the car in the parking lot where the police officer found it later. Looking through the footage of Jessica leaving her car, the investigators saw something they had not noticed before. Jessica's height was 5 feet 4 in and her weight was 130 pounds. However, the person who exited the car was much taller and heavier. Knowing the height of Jessica's car, the experts determined that the person's height was from 5 feet 11 inches to 6 feet 3 inches. While examining the abandoned car, the police discovered that the driver's seat was as close to the steering wheel as possible. This position would make it uncomfortable for someone over 5 feet 11 inches tall to sit behind the wheel. However, the police found an explanation for this. After getting out of the car, the person bent down and, as the detectives believed, moved the seat as close to the steering wheel as possible, thereby trying to give the police a reason to assume it was Jessica behind the wheel. But who was this tall person? As it turned out, Michael's height was around 6 feet. The police invited the man for questioning. He stated that he was not involved in the disappearance of his wife, whom, according to him, he loved very much. He, as before, claimed that he was at work when the kindergarten staff called him. Detectives interviewed Michael's colleagues and received a report on the geolocation of his phone on the day of Jessica's disappearance. He wasn't lying. Michael was at work when his wife disappeared, which meant it wasn't Michael on this recording. It was the 4th day since Jessica's disappearance. It's hard to imagine the stress her children had to experience. Their life wasn't the same. The search continued, but did not bring any results. Rewatching the recording of someone getting out of Jessica's car, the investigators puzzled over who it was. Once again, the officers noticed something they hadn't before. A minute after the unknown person disappeared behind the building, a white SUV, presumably a Ford, left there. Jessica's stepfather, Greg, matched the height description and had the same car. The police asked Greg to come to the station for a few questions. The man was shocked that he became a suspect in the disappearance of his stepdaughter. According to him, he left his car for repair at one of the service centers, and that day, a neighbor brought him there so that he could pick up his Ford. After that, he went to the Exxon gas station to eat something. It was the same gas station that provided the police with the CCTV footage. However, Greg didn't know that. After watching the recording again, investigators saw him driving past the Exxon gas station 2 minutes after he left the parking lot. He didn't stop there to have lunch. It turned out that Greg lied. But could the man Jessica called her father have been involved in her disappearance? After talking to the man's neighbor, the detectives discovered she did not drive him to the car service. It meant Greg's whole story was a lie. Putting all the facts together, the investigators concluded that Greg was at home when Jessica arrived to send the fax. Maybe something happened, and Greg drove Jessica's car to the parking lot in the city center. A group of police officers went to the man's house. Jessica's mother, Danelle, allowed the police to inspect the house. One of the officers immediately went to the fax machine and discovered that Greg had lied about it not working. Moreover, the device's usage history confirmed Jessica did send that fax. Therefore, she was in her parents' house on her disappearance day. A trash can in the basement contained napkins with traces of blood. Greg's home shoes, found in a dumpster on the street, also had dried blood on them. Danelle told the police that Greg had called the garbage company the day before and asked to pick up the trash. She hadn't given it much thought at the time. However, now she remembered that the trash can wasn't full yet. Most likely, that's how Greg got rid of the evidence, namely from the products and rags he used to clean the house. The police interrogated Greg again. They informed him they knew all his statements were false and that they found evidence in his house. They also mentioned they knew Jessica was in his house on the day of her disappearance. After that, the man started talking. Gregory Graff, or just Greg, told investigators that he came home on the afternoon of November 21st and found Jessica's car in the driveway and blood stains on the carpet. According to him, she was already dead when he returned home. He said he panicked and was afraid to call the police because he knew no one would believe him. He drove Jessica's car to a parking lot in the city center and then returned home. According to Greg, Jessica owed someone money, and that was the reason she died. This story was another lie by Gregory Graff. Detectives discovered that the day before Jessica disappeared, Greg bought adult toys. They were tired of listening to Greg's nonsense, so they directly asked him where he had put his stepdaughter's body, saying that an autopsy would give answers to many questions. Realizing he got caught, Greg changed his testimony again. He said he was at home that day watching adult videos when Jessica arrived, and asked if she could send a fax. She was using the computer, and Greg was standing behind her. According to him, he was aroused and desired his stepdaughter. Without saying a word, he pulled out a gun and shot her in the back of the head. Then he moved Jessica's body to the bedroom and drove her car to a parking lot in the city center. His Ford was standing near the car service, where he had left it earlier for minor repairs. That's why he went there. After getting out of Jessica's car, he moved the seat so everyone would think she was behind the wheel. His following words shocked the investigators. When he returned home, he turned on the video camera and placed it near the bed. Then, it'll be a strange phrase, but you'll understand what I mean. He shot a video of his contact with his stepdaughter. As you know, Jessica was already dead. The police later found this video on Greg's computer. According to him, he wrapped her body in a blanket and hid it in a ravine near his own house, after which he returned home and began cleaning. Greg said in the interview, "I wished I could get help. I'm not really a bad guy, I just lost my mind." After the confession, he talked about how his world changed after the crime. Greg said, "I lost everything. My business, my home in Florida, my dogs, my wife." Then he mentioned his family and parents, but he never once said anything about the loss of Jessica.
Authorities in Northampton County say a mother and newlywed who vanished last Friday has been found dead, and her stepfather is now charged in connection with the death.
Some motive that involves a sexual assault, I would call it that, or an attempted assault on this victim.
Thus, Donnell simultaneously found out that her daughter was dead and that her husband was the one who did it. But what Greg had done to the body was beyond the woman's imagination. After the arrest of Greg, the authorities issued an official statement. Unfortunately, we have sad news to announce today. Jessica Paget is deceased. She is the victim of a homicide, Northampton County District Attorney John Morganelli said. We still are a little bit hesitant to buy into the version of events that were given to us by the defendant, but we have reason to believe there was a sexual motive into this whole matter, unfortunately. According to Morganelli, the prosecutor's office examined all the evidence to determine whether Greg planned the attack. Through a statement released by Pennsylvania State Police, the Pagets thanked law enforcement, the media, and the public for their efforts. We are devastated by the loss of Jessica. She was a beautiful, vibrant young woman who was beloved by her family and friends. The world shines less bright today. They charged 53-year-old Gregory Gregg with taking the life of Jessica Paget. At the stage of the investigation, some suggested that when Jessica arrived, Gregg tried to persuade her into intimacy, but when she rejected him, he was afraid of exposure and took her life. But there was no way to prove it, since Jessica had no defensive wounds on her body. She died from a single wound to the back of the head, which confirmed Gregg's testimony. According to the laws of the state of Pennsylvania, the man could face the death penalty. However, since Jessica was dead when he committed the second part of his heinous crime, the prosecutor's office had no right to demand the death penalty for him. After examining Greg and Jessica's computers and phones, the police did not find any hints that there was a connection between them that went beyond the relationship between stepfather and stepdaughter. The trial began in 2015. District Attorney John Morganelli said Philadelphia lawyer John McMahon Jr. never filed the results of any mental health evaluation for Gregory Graff. McMahon said he had Greg evaluated for a possible insanity defense, but Greg did not have a diminished mental capacity. So McMahon didn't use the evaluation at trial. Donnell said she found out about her daughter's disappearance on November 21st when she was in Florida, choosing carpets for her new home. Greg picked her up at Lehigh Valley International Airport on November 22nd. He said it would be okay, they'd find her. At one of the court sessions, the jury had to watch a 6-minute video of Greg's heinous crimes. He used adult toys that he had bought the day before. The jury didn't want to watch the video, but the judge said they were obligated to do so before reaching a decision. Greg's lawyer tried to prove it wasn't a planned crime and that his client committed a crime of the 3rd degree, not the 1st. Therefore, Northampton County District Attorney John Morganelli made the difficult decision to show the jury a 6-minute video recording filmed by Greg. Morganelli said Greg pleaded not guilty to both charges. It left him no choice but to present all the evidence in his arsenal to convince jurors the crime was premeditated. The Commonwealth needed to show you what he did, Morganelli said in his closing argument. It wasn't pleasant, it wasn't tasteful, but we needed to show you what he did. One good thing about criminals is they're not rocket scientists. They make mistakes. It took the jury just 6 minutes to reach a unanimous decision. They found Gregory Graff guilty of taking Jessica's life and abusing her body. The court sentenced him to life imprisonment without parole. Asked by the judge if he had anything to say, Greg said, "No, sir. I'm just very sorry." After sentencing, the judge recommended that the jury seek counseling from a psychologist. After the verdict, Jessica Paget's husband, Michael, said, "It's been tough moving on without the only woman he ever loved and raising 3 children without her. She was the most wonderful person you'd ever meet." Donnell filed for divorce. However, there were difficulties, and she had to go to court. 55-year-old Gregory Graff, who appeared in court through a video feed from his Pennsylvania prison cell, refused to sign documents giving him 25% of his shared assets with Donnell. And that brings us to the end of this episode. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.